welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're doing our monthly debrief for a extremely late October. This video is brought to you by Noble Knight Games.
Our friends, Noble Knight
yes,
Games.
They're a sponsor of our channel. A bit more from them later on. But October feels like it was an age away, because it was. We're almost... Not quite, but nearly halfway through November when we're recording this.
Yeah.
And it just, we've done a lot of stuff, and so it just feels like that was a very long time ago. But I think we played a few games, is what I would say. But I do feel like our Dungeons and Dragons or Hackmaster campaign is kind of cutting into our time.
Yeah.
I'm feeling the squeeze on that more and more.
And I think we had a discussion about it. While I'm enjoying the system, I'm not in love with the system.
Yes.
And partly for me, I'm like, I'd rather be playing war games.
Yeah.
If I'm going to put the crunch into it, I'd rather be playing war games. But
yes,
we'll keep going
completely
because it's our friends and our family, and we have a good time generally.
It's still fun, but yeah. I feel like it's like, oh, we're going to play this and this and this, and it's like we really only have like two or three at the most in a month now, instead of like 5.
Well, Saturdays have become much more harder for me because of it's in the season where Color Guard is ongoing, and our Friday nights have been interrupted now by Hackmaster. So it is what it is.
Yes. So all that being said, in October we still played a few games.
We did.
So we had some friends down earlier on in the month.
Yep.
I think.
All right, let me.
Pretty sure it was earlier in the month. Again.
Yep.
My time is very wackadoodle. So Mike Heckman came over from St. Louis, and Ed Bryan, who's a local, came over, and we did a 4-player game of John Company, which was your first game.
It was.
And I think it was Ed's first game as well.
I think it was.
But
yeah.
Mike and I had played it twice at WBC.
So you've now played. With that game was your third.
Yes.
And then we also played.
Subsequently played it. So I've played this 4 times now, and it's becoming a favorite of mine. I really, really enjoy it. It's got everything that I like in a game that is like fighting.
Well, it's got negotiation.
Yes.
A little bit of deception. A little bit of cooperation.
Real table
talk.
Yeah. Because there's table talk in other games, but it's mostly just smack talking each other. This is like, we have to come to a decision about this, and like... Or,
I need help doing this, please help me, or do this.
If you're gonna like be rude about it, like, this will come back.
Yeah.
It's such a loose game where like everything's up for grabs. Figuring out how to do all of that and like what the value of stuff is at any given moment, that's challenging, but it is really fun when you start getting into it.
And I will say this, at your comment there, after 2 plays, I feel like I do now understand the value of certain things.
Yes.
I still don't understand everything, but I do, I got to at least get some inroad into these kind of things.
Yes.
And the concept of the game is, or maybe the antithesis of the game is, keeping the company alive, right? Keeping it out of bankruptcy so that you can mill as much profit and prestige and power from it as possible, retiring your family members to create a legacy, a lasting legacy.
And you're typically trying to fight at least one player who's not interested in doing that.
Because they may not have shares in the company, or they may have other designs.
Have good offices in the company.
Right.
Or they may just like have divested their portfolio and they've started to buy a lot of workshops, which they're worth a lot
if the company fails.
Tanks. So they're like, cool. But then you get into like, well, we're not going to do anything for you because you're working against us.
Yeah.
And then they're like, now I definitely am, and you've just put the nail in the coffin. And
so it's a balance. It's a balance, and I kind of joke with you because my 2 plays, the company has failed miserably, like crashed and burned in the 3rd turn, and I would like to play a game maybe where we get a little further, maybe to the 4th or 5th turn, and experience a company that's paying some dividends and doing well. And
it feels real good to make a lot of money. It feels real good.
I have not experienced that yet.
But John Company is
fantastic design. I think it looks good. It's fun. It's interesting. It's unique. I enjoy it. Yes. So plus it's multiplayer.
And then we played Fallen Land that same day.
Yep.
Which
Another big game.
we'd only ever played 2-player.
Yep.
And so to play it 4-player was a cool experience and something very different. There's like a video about this coming out as well. And this is the second edition.
Yep.
From Fallen Dominion Studios, and basically there's like a whole extra expansion that they did with it.
Yeah, it's called
I can't read Survivors or something like that.
I can't read those. It's right there.
Oh, it's they don't
Journey in the Dark, and then this is like the shop or something, the merchants or something.
Outriders trading with. But yeah, they kind of redid
It's all
the
included. Yep.
components, refreshed everything. It's much nicer than the first edition.
Oh yeah. Well, and I love this game because it's a narrative style game.
Yes.
You're pulling cards, you're reading cards, which represent encounters.
And their little pulpy stories.
Yep. And it's got every trope.
Every Pulp Fiction.
From every post-apocalyptic ever.
All the sci-fi, all the
all the zombie, the horror, everything. But it's just it's a blast. It's a light blast that plays in about 45 minutes per player. So you're going to be at it for 3 or 4 hours, but it's fun. It's interesting. There is a little bit of downtime. You know, we've talked about that, but it's fun. It's light. I don't know. I've enjoyed it. We've played it a couple of times, and I've really enjoyed it. And I'm glad to have this new edition, which is available. You can get this from Fallen Dominion Studios.
And you can play it solo. So if you just want to kind of potter around with it and like take your time and enjoy all that stuff, with I presume very little to no downtime, you can do that.
Yes.
But yeah, we played that on the same day as John Company. It was kind of a big day.
It was a whole day.
I also played. We played a very short game of Fire in the Lake that night as well. After you had to leave. I don't think Ed had ever played that one before.
Okay.
And so
I forgot about that because I didn't participate.
I almost forgot. It was so long ago. And we kind of potted around with that and played that for a bit. So that was fun to kind of again introduce someone to it who hadn't really done that before.
Sure.
Always like Fire in the Lake. It's a wonderful
game. Also, we played together a new game, Road to Independence, the American Revolution. This is from the Historical Game Company.
Yes.
Printed by Blue Panther. This is a very light, fun, and interesting game that uses a a mechanic with custom dice to basically do combat. And that mechanic is similar to Elder Sign.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That we've played.
It's the Yahtzee style, but custom dice where you roll the pool of dice and you can
match symbols,
complete lines, and then you roll them again and you complete another one. So it's very fast paced, but it's got fun decision making in it, and it's supposed to be.
Plays in about 60 to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I think it's very tough for the British to win this one.
And everyone I've spoken to who played it agrees.
Yeah. But I think it's a good looking game, well produced. The dice are absolutely gorgeous. They're custom, they're engraved, so they're not
very nice,
silk printed or stickered. So it's a very nice production, and I think there's at least a couple of other games that they've talked about coming out.
So because they have the French and Indian version, which is the first one.
Which I've never even heard of that one.
No.
They keep mentioning that, but I'm like, where is that?
And they have at least one more after this. I don't know what it calls though.
Yeah, not really sure.
I don't know if we know.
But that's a fun game. It's on Blue Panther. I've done some written content on it. We did a video review that was out on the blog or the channel.
That at San Diego,
absolutely.
Cool to see that.
Jason Matthews played it and said it was fantastic. So it is a good game. It's not just us, but very unique and interesting.
We played Ardennes too.
We did. We forgot about that.
That was this month or last month.
Yeah, this month is kind of. We played that just last weekend or 2 weekends ago.
Yeah, and I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
All right, Ardennes 2 from Multi-Man Publishing. This is a standard combat series game, SCS. And that is a system that we have played a couple of now and liked.
And just bought a couple more over there from our friends at Noble Knight.
Look at there. It goes this way around. Hey. This was a big 2-mapper. So this was the biggest SCS game that we've played together.
Yeah.
And it had a lot of counters in it. There's a full video review on the channel. There was a couple of production issues with the reinforcement schedule and maybe some of the color choices of the counters.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, the mechanics, love it. The
Mm-hmm.
gameplay was really good. What we were doing was great. Just the reinforcement schedule messed up strategically what could or would have happened. But the game itself is, with those little fixes, got the errata. It's very good.
This is a remake of the game that came out like in 1994, I want to say, 93, 94. So this is number 2, Ardennes 2. So it's a remake, and it's not just a new edition. They've actually changed the art on the board, and the counters looks very good. But they've also added some updated rules and mechanics. So the artillery is very different.
Yeah.
The artillery typically in standard combat series will actually inflict reductions, right? If you roll well enough.
Or the DG markers.
Right. This one, which is very unique, it affects combat and defense and movement values if your barrages are successful. Very unique. They added the traffic hexes in this one.
Yeah.
There were a couple of other things. I'm drawing a blank now, but
part of all that is that this is at a much smaller scale than a lot of the other SCS games that we've played, at least. So when we look at things like I played Africa and we played Rostov 41, those are at such a high level that you don't get into that granularity of like, this gun fired this, and like gave a modifier to movement. Like at the other scale, it's either like it either disorganizes or it did some damage.
Yeah.
Because it's such a high level. So it was very interesting to see this system in really quite a different setting, and it was wonderful. It was great, and there's a big old video review on this one too.
Well, we continue to love the standard combat series.
Yes.
In fact, love it so much that I went on our friends at Noble Knights and I got Stalingrad Pocket, which was the first game in the series, correct? Isn't that what we've decided?
I think so, yeah.
Because it's 1A or 1B now, because this is a...
This one's the one... Oh, is this one 1B? No, this is 1A.
1A, okay.
But I think this has gone through a couple of iterations, maybe. And then Iron Curtain, which is a big World War III game.
Cold War gone hot, but... We ended up getting both of these because I have enjoyed the standard combat series so much that these are the two that we don't have, and I'm like, look, we need to get those.
And these are also, like, SCS is such a good system for solo play as well.
Yeah.
Because it's I go, you go, and you just do the best that you can, and then you kind of sit on the other side of the table and do it again.
So this actually says it's a second edition.
Yes, which I think instead of...
That's why it's A.
It's
1A.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. 3 to 15 hours playing time. So smaller scenarios, right?
But that's also not that's not dissimilar from Ardennes. Ardennes about 45 minutes to an hour per turn, 16 turns.
Got it. And we played what? 6, 8 of those?
Yes.
You played 2 without me.
Yes.
Kind of got through the first slogging movement, and then we played like 5 or 6 turns. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. I'll definitely clip it, and definitely looking forward to this one
as well. It's a great system.
Oh, it's fantastic.
More will show up on our channel as time goes on.
Yeah, very cool. But love the standard combat series.
Did I do anything else? I don't think I did anything else.
Well, so I played the only solitaire game that I played this month, and none of my stuff's in the box because it's still set up. This is That Others May Live. Combat search and rescue missions in Vietnam from Hollandspiel. So this is the same designer, Brad Smith, who did the NATO solitaire game from what?
NATO Air Commander.
4 or 5 years ago? 3 or 4 years ago?
19 maybe? Very good.
Very unique and interesting solitaire game where you're literally going in to rescue down pilots in the Vietnamese jungles. So you have choppers, you have different aircraft, you have fast movers that can provide napalm support to suppress and destroy guns. And this is one of those games, you'll play a scenario, and at any time, if that survivor dies, you lose. So I've lost that way at least once. I've also lost because most of my airplanes got shot down. But it's unique, it's fun, it's interesting. I still haven't grokked it that well, grokked it enough to do a video, but I'm getting there, so I'm making progress. But it's really interesting. I've enjoyed it quite a lot. as I do almost all of those games from Holland Spiel, frankly.
I think the rest of the games that were played, it was all stuff on Rally the Troops.
Well, and I've become officially addicted.
Yes.
Thank you, Alexander,
You're
for
welcome.
ruining my life.
So it's all the classics on there, things like Andy and Abyss, Time of Crisis, play a lot of that. I play a lot of Wilderness War on there. I play Field of the Cloth of Gold, which is very cool.
Red Flag Over Paris,
Flag
we've
Over
played a couple
Paris,
times.
which I think
Starting to get it.
only as the Versailles player do I feel like now, and I've been away for a week, that like I kind of understand what I'm supposed to be doing.
Got it.
I'm a terrible commune player. It's like not even funny. And then what else do I play on there? I'm in a game of Hammer of the Scots. And
I've played that at least once or twice.
I'm also in a game of Rommel in the Desert, but I also don't really know what I'm doing in that. But yeah, that's so I have a lot of games going on.
I think I have 18 games right now going on.
Yeah, I have.
And I didn't take my moves this morning. I meant to get up a little earlier, so I feel bad. People are cursing my name.
That's something that I have continued to do, and that will continue going forward. It's a great way. Yeah, they got a limited selection. Did you see they put Waterloo on there as well?
I did. I saw that. Yeah, we need to play that.
But it's a great way to play. A very small amount of variety of games. But if you like those games, it's an excellent way to play those and play a lot of them as well.
And there's tons of people on there. People jump into games all the time. You will not have a difficult time in finding a game, frankly. So, yeah, I think that's all that we played.
I think so too.
In October.
That's
and then we played Hackmaster a couple of times, which, it's a neat system. It's just, I don't know. I'd rather play Pathfinder.
I think currently, here's what I feel about that. Is currently I'm playing the system, whereas we play Pathfinder so much that I was playing the role-playing game because I wasn't thinking about the system.
That's a good.
It's like, and that's how a lot of games are. But it's just taking a long time to like.
How many sessions have we played now? 5 or 6?
Yeah, something like that. And
so I think I'm finally getting combat. But the skills system is just very challenging.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of minutia in it of what each thing does and and there's so many. Yeah, we're getting there, but
eventually.
But I think that's everything that we played.
Okay.
So upcoming in November.
What are we going to play?
We've already been to San Diego Historicon, so I'm not going to pretend that we haven't.
Yeah.
But there we're going to play the big celebrity game of
Liberty or Death.
We played John Company.
Yep.
And everything else was prototypes of games which are upcoming, basically.
Yep.
And so go watch the video about that.
Yeah, I don't think we need to talk about that a whole lot.
Especially all of the prototypes.
Yeah, a lot of fantastic stuff, though, frankly.
And there's videos of different interviews from different designers coming up on a channel, so you can see some more detail about some of those as well. But I think big games that we're looking at this month is the Russian campaign.
GMT edition.
Yes. This is
not the Compass edition.
This is the original 1974 redone by Compass, which I have, but we have the GMT 5th edition, but it's just underneath this table.
Set up. We're going to play it after this.
It does not look like this, but this is
the
same thing.
And then this is all punched, clipped, and organized and ready to go. This is North Africa 41, the newest.
Like it doesn't fit in the box.
I told you that. So I've got mounted map boards. So if I had the paper maps, it would fit. But with a counter tray, the 2 mounted map boards, this is what you get. You get about a 1/4 inch of an overlap, and it drives me wild. Like in my head, I'm screaming right now.
Let's go paper maps on that one.
Well, I've still got the paper maps. I haven't made a decision about whether I will just try to.
Well, I don't know about you. What I do, so I've got Ardennes 44, and put it right here. Mm-hmm. I've got the paper maps in it, but I've got the mounted maps like behind it, in their little packet.
Okay, I guess
because that way they're just not in the box.
Do that, sure. But anyway, 4X, the 40X series.
Although this one is quite divergent from that.
I think it's different and unique.
It's a remake of one of his old games that had a different name, and I don't know what it was.
Okay. But yeah, I'm very excited about this.
It looks wonderful.
It does. So we're definitely going to give it a go. It's a big 2-mapper.
And I like it. I like a good Africa game. I just think there's
Sure.
something interesting about like the supply puzzle of it.
The
and
supply is always
make
very
it,
fascinating. And this one has a lot of different pieces for supply, from trucks to boats to planes. I mean, there's just all kinds of...
And then you've got the strategic supply coming in through Malta, like
Yep.
you even get there before
And then you've
it gets
got
the minutia.
separate standing supply sources that will deplete, kind of like Holland 44,
Yeah.
where you drop them in. So very interesting. Very much looking forward to that.
And then, so those two big ones, then I think we're going to try to get to 1944 D-Day to the Rhine, which is from Worthington Games. We've played their Bulge one.
Really a
using this
light,
system.
good game.
Yes, and this adds aircraft to it, which
Yep.
the other one didn't have, especially on the dice. And this is at a much bigger scale
Yep.
than that is. So I'm curious to see if or how that changes anything. But
Yep.
I liked that system because you could play a Bulge game in 2 hours.
Yeah.
And
Well, the best part is it has custom dice, right? And you're rolling dice looking for the NATO symbol markers that match the things you're trying to hit, right? So you're attacking, or maybe it's the other way around.
yeah.
So if you're attacking infantry, you're looking for infantry hits. And it's, or maybe I'm wrong.
Or you're
What you're attacking
you
with.
want to hit with tanks and infantry.
Yeah.
But it's the custom dice you're trying to roll.
Very unique, very interesting.
Keeps it simple.
Yep, keeps it simple.
You just throw your dice and do your move.
But I'm excited to play that one. So, and we'll play that in an afternoon, 2 hours.
Yeah, that's a game that you can kind of squeeze in
Yeah.
with some other short format game as well.
Another game we tried to play in the airport. We didn't get very far because the rules are kind of bad. I would like to give it one more go because I think there's an interesting little quick playing game here. I would just like to...
little very abstract little card game.
So this is called Entrenched, and it was off a Kickstarter. I think I paid $22 for it. Daedalus Creations. Nice art. I mean, I saw some people complain that it looked like World War II. That looks like World War II, but some of the other ones definitely are World War I.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what this is.
It definitely looks like an American helmet, doesn't it?
It does.
I don't know what it's supposed to be.
So anyway, we're going to give that a try again. It's got some dice in it, and it's a card
world's
game.
smallest rules sheet.
And not very good
And it
rules.
was not good.
No.
And we were,
And we were in the airport and tired and coming home and grumpy and had just eaten Chinese food, everything else. So, Solitaire. What are you going to play, Solitaire?
Well, yes. So I am going to attempt, I know I've said this before, my goal is to play A Glorious Chance this month.
We should play that together because I have my copied clipped. We should play it together and just learn it.
I'll set it up and potter around with it so it's easy to teach as well. I've heard good things
I have
about
too.
It looks
And it looks
cool.
great, yep.
And also nothing quite like it out there
Nope.
as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's a War of 1812, right, on the Great Lakes. And it's shipped. There is some ground stuff. Where'd you get the...
So this just came in whilst we were away.
Oh, wow.
The good folks over at Cube for Me were very gracious, and they sent me their Wargame set for this.
Nice.
So it has all the cards and all the counter sheets.
And it actually
And it
fits.
fits in perfectly into the box. It's a really nice set. Which, when they have a lot of cards like that, it's kind of a tough one.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah,
Nice.
I'm looking forward to playing this.
I've clipped my copy because I wanted to play it. But
And this is by Gina Willis, who
Yep.
was co-designer on Skies Above Britain. So
it's from Legion War
I have a
Games.
lot of
So
hope for that one.
looks great. I'm going to give these two a go. Global War, designed by Ben Madison from White Dog Games, and Vive l'Empire. I'm not going to say that again because I've embarrassed myself. Designed by Herman Lutman, published by Blue Panther, a solo Waterloo game. That's pretty
Hex Encounter.
rare. Yeah, it's Hex Encounter. So definitely going to give these two a try this month if I can get off my table that others may live. I need to give that another play or two. But yeah, looking forward to these. I love these little solitaire games. And I really want to play Halls of Hegra. So this just came in. I didn't know if you knew that. He reached out and asked us if we wanted a copy. I know you had a prototype, but I was like, yes, I would love a copy because I want to play
I
it.
had to send the prototype on.
Got it.
I don't have it.
So Halls of Hegra from Tompet Games. This is a worker placement World War II game, right? But it's solitaire, and it just looks fun, where you're worried about everything from supplies.
And the kinds of things you do in this game are on such a micro level that you get a really cool narrative out of it.
Sure.
Like, you have to,
And it's, I mean, look at that. Look at those bags.
Because you're going in to like occupy this old fort that's been
Yep.
abandoned, and you have to like dig the snow out of out of like the charts room
To be able
hopefully
to-
find a map.
Nice.
Like, come on.
Nice.
That's awesome. And then you have to fight the waves of Germans coming in.
And it's a no-win situation,
Oh,
right?
yeah. You're like,
You're going
I
to
think you start
lose.
with like 20 guys, and if you can recruit enough from the village, it's like a handful of guys, and
Yeah.
But it's great.
It looks
Great.
really good. I think the production value is really high. We like Tompak games. We really enjoyed the Donning the Purple
Donning
game
the
that they
Purple, really
came
fun.
out with, and this is kind of their second game, right? They did an expansion.
This is their third game.
What was the other one?
They did a game before. It was like a grid-based medieval game.
Okay.
But yeah, this is.
We didn't play that one.
No.
Definitely.
That's from a while ago.
Okay.
The other thing we're doing is a couple of weeks, or next week, we're going to play Border Reavers
6-player Border Reavers. And John Company again.
and John Company. So we're going to do both of these. It'll be probably a good long
And
day.
if we don't get 6 players, because I'm afraid Jacob may not be able to come, we'll play John Company 5 players, but then we'll have to play like Ancient Civs of the Middle East, or because this one specifically it's 2, 3, 4, or 6. I don't think you can play this one 5 players at all.
Yes, and I would never do it with less than 4.
Got it.
Like, you just lose so much to me.
Got it.
In my opinion. Or you're like, end up doing twice as much work.
But this is an interesting looking game. We played, or at least played a turn at WBC and really enjoyed it. I had a good time with it before I got sick and then had my trip to the hospital. So
yeah, I think that's everything that we're going to try to play, which is a lot.
but remember, like today we're playing a game because it's
Yeah.
Veterans Day holiday. I think next weekend is Thanksgiving. Or no.
Next
weekend is
open,
gaming.
So
But then the following week is Thanksgiving. I was going to try to take off maybe Wednesday, and we were going to play.
yes, good point.
We'll actually do Frosthaven a little bit on Thanksgiving Day with our father-in-law, and then we'll have Friday or Saturday to play.
Yeah.
So I think we'll have.
Plus a solo game here. And
Yeah,
there.
I think we'll have some opportunities. I think we're going to get most.
Well, and yeah, next Saturday, like these are on the docket.
Yes,
like,
so we know we're going to play those. We'll get there. It's going to be a full
I think that
gaming month.
that sometimes we're very ambitious here, and we say, "Oh, we're gonna play all these games." I feel like this month it actually might be slightly more realistic because we do have some fixed opportunities.
Yeah.
and we played a bunch of.
And we're playing all those games that we talked about in our San Diego Historicon
So we're gonna
debrief
play Your
video.
Death in November. We
Yeah.
played it.
Yeah. So
amongst other things.
it's been a full month.
Yeah, wild.
And I love Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday, frankly.
Do we have anything on Kickstarter and or GameFound crowdfunding stuff?
Well, one that I would bring up, Would Be Aces, is a print and play designed by Matt White. Matt White did those Until the Bitter End games where they were infantry based. This one is, it's focused on the P-47. So during World War II, he loves that plane. This is his first air combat game. It ends fairly soon though, so if you're interested in that, it's a print and play. I want to say it's like $15. It's pretty cheap. But definitely one that you will want to check out. One of the ones that has not dropped yet and is supposed to this month is The Other Side of the Hill from Knack Wargames. It is a 4-player, very unique game where each player is taking on one of the German commands in World War II, and it's like internal politics, strife, arguing, fighting for resources and troops, etc., to do their offensive. So very unique and interesting looking game. I don't know much about it other than what I have read online just a little bit, but it looks really good.
Yep.
And I think it definitely has some
Something very
potential
different as well.
Yeah, and it looks good. What I've seen looks really good.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are the two on Kickstarter that I will share. I'm sure there's others,
There's
but
always literally-
U-Boot just ended with Phalanx
Yeah,
like a week or two
second edition
ago.
with the big miniature.
My gosh, it had a miniature that's like this big. I know Phalanx is working on a couple of Kickstarters. I know Knack is working on some others. So there will be a lot in the next couple of months.
Well, and they just delivered a couple games off of their pre-orders that wasn't part of
Yep.
Kickstarter as well.
Keep them rolling.
And they did Iron Blood, Snow and
Yep,
Blood just
that's
showed.
one we just got, and I'm going to unbox it, and we need to play that one
that's a fun
and
little
do a
game as
review. And then Total Domination, which is a reskin or remake of mini World War II from Formosa Force games that we played like 4 years ago. Looking forward to that one, but I've got both those at home.
I think that's just to be a bit of a nicer production and also available.
Yes.
That was the problem with mini World War II.
You couldn't get
not
it.
Get it.
And I really enjoyed that game. It was light and fun.
Got it either.
He contacted us. I did an interview with him. He contacted us, and then he said, would you guys play this? And I was like, sure. He mailed it to us. We played it, and then nobody could find it, which was kind of a failure.
Distribution here in the US, you will be able to
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. But I'm telling you, I've got a stack of games. I think I've got 30 games that have arrived in the past month and a half.
And then there's us buying.
We're idiots.
New game.
What
I don't know
morons.
what we're doing. So, speaking of which, this video, as always, this monthly debrief is sponsored by Noble Knight Games.
Where you can get great games like
Yeah.
Stalingrad Pocket,
Yes.
which we just got like idiots.
Or Iron Curtain.
Yeah, which we just got like
And
idiots.
and I'm on there just like looking at like,
Oh,
"Ooh,
all the
look
time.
at this and look at that
All the
and
time.
look at this and like ask me if I've pre-ordered a game on there and you're like,
Yeah. But they do have some new releases as well.
yeah, that's so.
I think I asked you about, what game did I ask you about?
You asked me about something that wasn't there,
Okay.
but I pre-ordered the Devil's Cauldron Second Edition
Okay.
through them because I've got store credit for it,
Got it.
and you know.
Yeah, we just traded in a bunch of games.
Yeah, it's that's just one of those things where I'm like, do
Yeah.
I need a GTS game?
Why not?
Yes, because
Why
I don't
not?
have one. And
Yeah.
the more
Did we ever decide to order GTS Utah Beach?
we have not made a decision
Okay.
one way or the other.
We were discussing. That's a huge game.
Yes, it's very big.
But if you don't get it for this price, you're going to pay the huge price.
And it's all and like I don't know how often they reprint those games.
Probably not very often.
Yeah, like they're redoing Devil's Cauldron, but they're not redoing the other one, which is part of that. So Devil's Cauldron is just Arnhem and the bridge next to it, which is Nijmegen, I believe.
Okay.
And then the other one, I forget what it's called, is Eindhoven. No, it's Nijmegen and the other one. It's like the bottom half. But, so,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Nice.
I've been watching too much Aardwolf's Lair.
Sure.
He talks about like GTS all the time, and so I'm like, ooh, and he recommends that one, and I'm like, I love Arnhem, and it's like,
Yeah, we love
I haven't
Airborne.
even like I've got It Never Snows.
Yeah, we've got so many games that we'll never
Why do
play.
I need another one? But I'm
Yeah,
gonna do it.
We're stupid.
Yes, but you know I've got that. So all that to say, you can pre-order new games and got new releases on Noble Knight as well. So
Yeah.
not just old ones.
Yeah.
But here's a little commercial for them too.
And we appreciate their support.
Yeah.
They've been very kind to us. They've helped us. And we appreciate that you guys help them as well.
And the reality is it's their support that enables us to go to things like
Yep.
San Diego Historicon.
Yep.
So you can go and watch our video on that and everything that we did and experienced. And it's like, we would never have got out there to play all those games and meet those people
Yeah.
without this. So we're
Yeah.
very grateful to Noble Knight, and thank you very much.
So I think that's everything. Now time for the main event, maybe?
Yes. So
maybe?
The main topic of today's...
And I'm a little nervous about this topic. Only because I want to make sure that it's interesting for people.
Yes.
I think it's a good thing, but I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe I'm being...
I hope that this is instructional and educational and informative. I don't know
And
if it will
interesting.
be interesting
Yeah.
or entertaining now.
Yeah.
But this is something that has come up a lot from like comments on YouTube or on social medias where people are like, hey, what does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the barriers of entry to wargaming is that we speak a separate language to a lot of other games.
Well, there's a terminology involved. And everybody, when you hear certain things like a CRT, we don't have to wonder what that is.
Yeah, we know
We
what that
specifically know, but people seeing CRT have no idea.
Like, if I was to go onto a forum of 18xx games, I guarantee they have a parlance, and I have no idea what they're talking about.
Absolutely.
And it's the same thing for war games. And so what this video is intended to do is to help just, like, define all those terms.
Sure.
Because...
Well, I don't know about every term, but a good chunk of them.
And if there's a part 2 of this at some point,
sure,
because it's needed, who knows?
Well, I also, the acronyms are a part of it, you know, CRT, DRM, those kind of things. But I've also thrown in some of those other things like, what's exploitation movement?
Yeah.
What is strategic movement? And how are those typically modeled in games? Because those are very important parts of war games. Zones, ZOC is another one we'll talk about. Anyway, that's the goal here. We'll see if it comes off well. I'm hoping most of you watch and don't just click off because you think it's boring. I think that's my concern. But
hopefully, maybe someone who's new to wargaming will be like, "Oh, sweet! Here's some definitions of some things." Because there are a number of games out there that have like a glossary that'll have a lot of this information in it. But like,
sure,
you have to have spent $100 on that game to get it, and it's like,
yeah,
for some people who are trying to figure out if they want to get into the hobby, that's a big investment.
That's a big, yeah.
And you don't know that the glossary's in there in the first place.
Yeah, I think the other thing I wanted to throw on this was, you know, some of the acronyms that are used for the systems themselves: COIN, SCS, OCS, GTS, you know, CSS. I would just like to go through a couple of those and say, here's what this is and what you can expect.
So let's crack open the list and let's dive on in, honestly.
Well, all right. So CRT. Let's just start with CRT.
Okay.
Or you can...
Well, should we do... Let's do the... Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's talk about some of the systems first.
Okay, that's fine.
Because I think that might help.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And it's kind of all over the place. So...
Sure.
Let's talk about... Let's start with, like, MMP. Because they have only acronyms.
Yep.
So SCS is something that you will hear about a lot on this channel, which stands for Standard Combat Series. It is an easy-to-learn system, and it's great for being your first ever Hex Encounter war game. But SCS, Standard Combat Series. Kind of the next level up from that.
Well, real quick, let's give a very simple overview of what you can expect from that series, right? So Standard Combat Series, I think, right, uses a CRT. It uses artillery in a specific way, typically as reductions, but as we saw in Ardennes 2, it does some reducing of power and movement. So it's pretty standard stuff, right? It's focused on I go, you go,
I move
combat.
Guys,
yep.
We fight with the guys, we resolve that, and then it's your turn. You move with your guys and fight with the guys.
Yeah.
There's other layers of stuff in some of the titles and not in others, but it is, you know, your supply is like, can you draw a line to the edge of the map?
Yeah.
If there is supply, typically speaking.
And typically the scale of those are operational, correct?
I would say typically, yeah.
Yes. I'm trying to think if we've played.
Some of them are larger than operational.
Okay.
I don't know.
Anyway.
You can get into the
so anyway, go on. I won't belabor the points.
From there, we're going to kind of take a step up in complexity to BCS, which is the Battalion Combat Series. And BCS is much newer than Standard Combat Series.
Less volumes.
Yeah, fewer volumes.
I think there's like 6 or 7 maybe?
Yes, whereas like SCS is like
25.
Yeah, something stupid. And BCS is quite different from a lot of other games. It's still a Hex Encounter war game, but in this one, you're focusing more on formation activation. Instead of, I'm going to move all my guys on the map and then fight with all of them, you're going to activate a specific formation, and they'll all have like a matching color on them typically, and they'll have an HQ, and it's like this blob of guys.
They have to be in the blob to be able to be activated.
Yeah, and so now
which a blob is a nebulous
like command radius.
Yep.
And there is like some supply counters, and you have to have your supply that then goes back, and there's some rules about interdiction. And then you're also concerned about, and the hallmark of BCS, here we go, is the snafu table.
Yep.
Where you're going to roll a die, and based on certain modifiers,
can you activate again?
You will get a full activation where you can go hog wild.
Yep.
Half an activation where you can't do nearly as much,
Or
you get snafu and it's not great.
yeah.
So there's a lot more unknown and kind of risk in that game where it can feel that's quite gamey in a way. Where like, I keep getting crappy rolls, or I get some amazing rolls where I need them. But you get a much more interesting and unpredictable story out of that game, and that's a lot of, okay, how do I make the best out of this?
Yeah.
But SCS, you don't get as much.
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, the snafu roll also, it's like you can activate the same formation multiple times, but you have to keep rolling, and it gets harder and harder and harder.
You can roll them a second time, but that penalty is severe.
It's like a -3 to your die roll, or something like that.
It's very unlikely that you'll get a good thing out of it.
But it's a press your luck style of, okay, I really need to operate this formation and make a big impact here. I'm going to do it again.
And those are also good for solo play, because you pick this formation, you do your stuff with them. And then you go to the other side and pick a formation and do your stuff with them. So and you can't look at it as stacks, and so you forget what the hell you've got.
Yeah.
The step up from that is OCS, Operational Combat Series. Operational Combat Series is much more focused on the logistics behind combat. The games are operational scale games, and you have an HQ similarly, and they'll have command radiuses. But the supply is much more granular. You have a certain amount of supply points, and there's all sorts of rules about how much you can draw from.
Throwing supply.
Based on like trucks and trains and weather. And then you've got to project that supply to your units from your command and supply.
So there's a hex limit sometimes, but you can have like, I'm trying to remember what they called it.
They have like range extenders. And
that's what it was.
Well.
I wanted to call a repeater, like but range extenders, so you can get even further.
Yeah, so it's like a mini depot that you can send the supplies up, and then they filter them out.
Yeah, very interesting.
But in that game, you need supply, and you assign your supply to specific units.
Yeah.
And if they do not have supply, they don't do anything.
Yep.
So it's much more detailed and granular in that sense, and it's very puzzly. And if you like that kind of thing and you want to make that investment, OCS is something to look at.
I think the other hallmark, in my opinion, of OCS is you're going to see big stacks.
Yes.
You're going to see 5 or 6 units stacked on each other, and then there's a ton of supply markers all over. We got a kind of a crash course from Gary with Ardwolf's Lair on Smolensk. And I liked it so much, although I wouldn't say we played it. We kind of messed around. I bought Smolensk, right? It's still unclipped, sitting on my shelf. But one day, we will get there. They do have a new volume coming out called Crimea, OCS Crimea. It looks really good, but it's also a smaller...
It's 2 maps.
I want to say it's 1 map. It's 2 maps, but I feel like it's a smaller, more introductory focused game.
Compared to some of
in
the
that
games
series.
Like 4 or 5
Yeah.
game. Some of them are massive.
So that may be one you want to look at. I know I'm interested in it, so we'll see. But
those are like the 3 main... Well, okay. They also have GTS.
Grand Tactical Series.
Grand Tactical Series. And these are very large format, very long games. And, like... So we'll talk about Devil's Cauldron. It is just the northern part of Operation Market Garden, and it's 5 maps.
Yeah.
So I say that to give you an indication of the units on the maps are companies, and there's a lot of them. And you get into like support platoons and all this stuff, and it's very granular. It looks incredible on the table.
It does.
We've seen...
in action at WBC.
Yeah, it's amazing, but it's very detailed.
Yeah.
They can be very long and very daunting, and they're very expensive. But
like $250 expensive, right?
Yes, but like if you're buying that and committing to that,
that's what you're gonna play for 2 years.
Yeah, and those games are kind of incredible. We don't have that much experience with it. You know, we've talked to people who played it and
we've
had a little demos.
We've watched, had them, but we've never played.
No, but I want to.
I would like to,
so that we can piddle around with it because it looks so cool.
Yeah.
But that's at the very big and heavy scale. So that's kind of all their World War II systems. Now, there's other games within that, but that's kind of their core hex encounter systems like that. They also do things like GCACW, which is Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. They have a couple of Napoleonic systems. They have Line of Battle and Great Battles of the I don't remember. I have some other one as well. But they have a few different systems. They do ASL, which is Advanced Squad Leader, which is a very deep and rich and crunchy tactical game system. They also have ASL Starter Kits, which you might see as ASL SK with a number after it, depending on which volume it is. And then a number of other titles as well. But they have, they're like acronym central over there.
Yeah.
And
actually, I think it's cool. I love to be able to say SCS. I just enjoy that.
So that's kind of MMP. Compass doesn't have quite so many systems like that have acronyms, but they do have a few. They have a company scale system, which
CSS,
is CSS. And I just recently learned, and kind of figured it out, is that the CSS is kind of Compass's answer to the Grand Tactical GTS system from MMP. Apparently they're very similar.
Yeah.
Which is why I was like, I'll buy a GTS game.
Well, because we were able to play Saipan and enjoyed it quite a bit. Now we have a couple of others that we have not played yet. Montelimar I have, and then I think you have Guam.
Guam,
yeah.
But that was part of the thing. I was like, we played that, and it was really good. And knowing that that's kind of similar to what GTS is, I'm like, that's less daunting.
Sure.
Knowing kind of what we've done.
I still can't believe we got CSS out and tried to play that so many years ago, and we've come a long way since that day.
But I think they don't have a lot of other ongoing long-term systems that have crazy acronyms in them.
Not really.
They do a lot of individual titles or stuff.
They do a lot of great games. They just
less of the jargon.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about GMT, because GMT
has a couple of those.
Yeah, it has a few of those. So let's start with Coin. Because I think that's the most popular. Coin stands for Counter Insurgency.
CO, Counter, IN, Insurgency. Coin series. And that's a technical military term that is used by military planners and the DoD and Pentagon, blah, blah, blah. That's not a made-up name. That's what they call it. Counterinsurgency. So counterinsurgency is focused on small-scale battles between asymmetric factions. So not every faction has the same resources or capabilities or force structure or units, but each of those volumes focuses on a historical period. There are ancients ones, you've got Falling Sky and Pendragon. Those are both ancients. Then you've got more modern, Cuba Libre, Andean Abyss, A Distant Plain. And then you've got, you've got now everything. You've got some World War II one in design. China's
War?
I'm drawing a blank. Brian Train's China's War, I think. Then you've also got some kind of one-offs, People Power, which is a focus on the Philippines insurgency, and the British Way, which focuses on little insurgencies in smaller countries, etc. Except Liberty or Death, which is the AMREV.
Typically, those are games where you have like a large government-style faction, and then you'll have its smaller, either revolutionary or rebellious factions, that kind of stuff, and how they fight and interact with each other is very different. And that system is to model those in all sorts of different periods.
So the Coin series is card assisted, and there's a guy that keeps dogging me, and I'm just like, you're an idiot. Card assisted is not card driven. They are completely and utterly different. Card driven requires op points and an event. Card assisted just has an event and it sets the turn order. It doesn't drive the game. I'll die on that hill.
Yeah. In common parlance, a card-driven game, a CDG.
A CDG,
Here at the
another
Player's
acronym.
Aid, we use that phrase to refer to the Mark Herman style of CDGs.
Yes.
There's a lot of other people that define it differently than that. That is what it means here. So
there can be a lot of other people that define it differently. It's not correct. I'm sorry.
But then they sit through and they define it, and it's like, okay,
yeah,
technically. But when we talk about CDGs, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So they have Coin. What else?
They have the 40X series, right?
Yes.
It's It's, yeah.
So that's a series of games from Mark Simonich, and it literally will have like whatever the location or name of the battle is, and then it's the 44.
So the year that it occurred in, right?
And so we've got North Africa
41.
Or we've got there's a Ukraine 42, there's a France 40.
I think it's Ukraine 43.
Sure.
Yeah, France
Stalingrad
40.
was 40.
Yeah, 42.
42, that's what
Holland 44. I mean,
and they all generally
Salerno 43.
use the same
Yep.
system.
Yep. Generally the same combat, movement, and then he uses a ZOC that's a ZOC bond, right? Zone of control bond between two small or smaller units.
Yes, and generally speaking, they'll use the same system. That's why we kind of lump them together in this family of 40x games. If you hear a 40x game or a Simonich game,
that's what we're talking about.
You know, you start getting into okay, I have some amount of assumed knowledge that might be easier for me to read this rulebook.
Yeah.
Other systems that GMT has, GBOH, which is Great Battles of History, and there's a million of those. Most of those are Ancients games. Mm-hmm. I think they have a couple of medieval ones.
My favorite in that series is SPQR.
Yes, it's very
which
good.
Is Senate Populi, blah, blah, blah. It's a Roman word for the army.
But those are tactical Ancients games with lots of pieces, and you line them all up, and then the enemy lines all theirs up.
And you fight it out.
Fight it out. It's not any more complicated than that.
And then they have a simple GBOH series,
yes.
right, where they've taken that GBOH series, pared it down a little bit, and tried to make the rules a little simpler.
And they are.
Yeah.
So that is a little baggie that you get with just a little kind of simple rule book in it, and you can use that with most of the GBOH titles.
And the entries,
so you buy the SBQR box, and then you buy the little simple rules separately, and you use those in that box. All the new editions of GBOH and the reprints they're doing have the scenario specifics for simple GBOH in them.
Yeah.
So you just need the core rules, but if you get some like the older versions of them, you can get the separate sheets for those.
Yeah.
But just buy the new ones; they're much better. They also have Boar, which is Battles of the American Revolution.
Mm-hmm. They're coming out with a small bore, which is kind of smaller battles, but Battles of the American Revolution.
And systematically, it's very different from GBOH, but conceptually, it can be similar where it's at a tactical level. Here's my guys on the board, often in a line, and you're fighting over much more interesting terrain.
Yeah.
And it's American Revolutionary War. The game is less complicated than you might think, or that it might look, is what I would say.
I would say it's eminently playable once you actually dive into it and play it. Very cool combat system, very interesting, kind of diverging strategies that you use, and that results in very interesting.
Then they also have GBACW, which is Great Battles of the American Civil War, which, confusingly, does not use a system that's anything like the Great Battles of History, nor does it use anything that's like the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. It's a very different system. Apparently it's pretty complex. We've not played it, unfortunately. We have one, but never played it. But just know that that's Great Battles of the American Civil War. Again, it's tactical. It's a single battle. You play out the battle.
Yeah. They have Men of Iron series.
So you might see MOI, Men of Iron. That is a medieval tactical game.
Very, very good system. We've enjoyed that the little bit that we've played.
And it's very easy to learn.
I would agree.
It's on par with the simple Great Battles of History.
If you're looking for a good introductory game, the game in C3I magazine, I'm trying to remember.
Battle of Wakefield.
Battle of Wakefield, I think, is a great introduction to that system.
Yes, and it also shows you that a lot of the battles are historical and not necessarily well balanced.
Yeah, right.
That's part of Richard Berg's design. He's like, hey man, this is not...
This is what it was.
This is what happened.
Yeah.
He'll often give you balancing options that you could do.
Yeah.
So just look into that if that's something you're interested in. But he'll say, hey, this is skewed towards the,
no doubt,
the Lancastrians. Add this and this if you want a more balanced play. Okay. But the Men of Iron's a really fun system. It's really easy. very simple to play, but it feels crunchy and meaty.
Yeah.
And you get medieval battles, which is awesome.
I actually really enjoyed it. That Battle of Wakefield was very, very fun. And then we played, which one in the Men of Iron series did we play?
We played a battle of it was Crown of the Crusades.
So good. It was good.
At Infidel, I think.
Yeah, it was good. Very good.
The last one that we'll talk about, because I don't, is CNC.
Yeah.
Which stands for Commands
And Colors.
And Commands and Colors is a massive
So here's
family.
Napoleonics.
Yeah, let's just grab it. We have a
so
whole
heavy.
big old video, I think, ranking these.
Yeah.
So Commands and Colors, this is Commands and Colors
Napoleonics.
They have Commands and Colors Ancients. They have Commands and Colors Samurai. Commands and Colors Medieval.
And it's not just GMT, though, too, right?
Yes.
Days of Wonder has Memoir 44. Compass Games has Commands and Colors Tricorn.
Yes.
Who else has? Does anybody else have?
PSC did World War I Commander, I think is
Yep,
what it was
and
called.
Red Alert.
It was the Great War. Is that what it was called?
The Great War, yeah.
And they did Red Alert, Space Fleet Warfare. Those might not have the CNC name, but they're part of the CNC
Same family.
same designer, same system, just in different settings.
Great system that really focuses on a use of a hand of cards to activate wings and to take actions. Attack, move, retreat. Very chaotic, very fun, fairly a light system.
Very, very friendly for new players.
I would say
not this one.
Napoleonics is very much more complicated because each of the different unit types and nations have different abilities and
it's a much larger,
little more complex
battle matrix of, hey, this guy fights like this against this guy.
Yeah.
But it's a trifold. There's so many different types of units from so many different nations, especially with all the expansions.
Another one that I would mention is SOS, States of Siege.
Yes.
You know, that's a solitaire game system that was created by Victory Point Games.
I think, yes, originally.
Right,
Yeah.
Victory Point Games. And there's like 20 volumes in that. We've played many of them and done videos on the channel, but it's a solitaire game that typically uses a central point that you are defending with 5 or 6 converging tracks. And you play cards. Cards are played and they tell you what happens to you and then how many actions you get. You play out and you try to survive to the end. Very fun, interesting solitaire system. Decision Games has the Folio series, and I can't remember, it's Commando. They have the Commando series. So I've played
it. Raider series?
Maybe it's the Raider series. But it's very good. It's a solitaire game system. But those are kind of some of the acronym systems that were wanted to share.
You're going to hear a lot of those types of games talked about. You'll hear those very regularly talked about, just because it's, who wants to say great campaigns of the American Civil War all the time? So you'll hear
GBACW,
right? And so that's just the games. So now we're going to talk about some of the more specifics of terminology that you'll find within some of these games.
Okay, do we want to just go down the list?
Yes.
Right? All right, so CRT.
Which you mentioned earlier stands for Combat
Results Table.
So you're going to roll some dice, and depending on what you rolled, and potentially some other factors, you are going to consult this table, and you look up on a little row in a column, and that says, this is what happens because of what you rolled.
Yeah.
Usually it's not more complicated than that, although the CRT can come in a number of different formats.
Absolutely. Typically, not always, typically it's an odds-based format, right? So you might have 12 combat factors, or CFs, right?
Yes.
And the defender might have only 3 combat factors, CFs. So you divide 12 by 3, that's your 4-to-1 odds. You consult the 4-to-1 line, you roll a die, a 6-sider, a 10-sider, 2d6. I rolled a 12, you consult that. Oh, at a 4-to-1 odds, I'm going to do 2 losses to the defender, and then they flip their counters and sometimes have to retreat, or sometimes it'll kill them.
Or it's a stalemate. But the CRT is kind of the distribution of results that you could get from combat, generally speaking.
And I think it's done on a bell curve based on the odds mathematically. So it's, you'll notice if you ever study a CRT, there's like a line going through the middle.
Yep.
And those are kind of all the same.
All the neutrals.
Yeah, the same results, not good. Because that's like a 3 on a D6. Nothing happens. And then everything below that is better for the attacker. And then everything
above that
I'm sorry,
is bad.
Yeah,
You rolled low.
or vice versa, depending on. But that I would love to be smarter than I am, so that that I could really understand mathematically the distribution of those numbers and results, because I find it fascinating.
Well, and watching, once you experience more war games, the CRT is often the most interesting part of the game.
Yes,
because some games will build like catastrophic losses into those, or like massive amounts of attrition to those. Where instead of doing combat factors, you're doing like manpower points, and where it doesn't matter if you roll really well, you committed 100,000 troops to the battle, a lot of them are going to die. Like, just there's so many.
Yeah.
You know, even if you won, great, we killed 60,000 of your guys. 60,000 of your guys are going to do 60,000 guys worth of damage to my 100,000 guys.
Yeah.
I still eviscerated your army, you lost everyone, but I also lost 3/4 of my army as well, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And you can, the more experience you have, the more you can see that kind of thing in a table. You're like, oh, that's what they're trying to do, and it's very enlightening.
Well, I think typically, based on the scale of the game, the highest odds possible kind of replicate that possibility of combat in a certain amount of space, right? 1 hex might represent 2 miles.
Yeah.
And the highest odds on that table might be 5 to 1. Because you just can't get more guys in there. So to me, it's mathematically interesting. I always think it's fascinating. So the next one I have on there is ZOC.
So before we do that,
let's
talk about DRMs. Because that relates very much to our CRTs.
Yep, DRM,
You'll hear the phrase DRM a lot. And a DRM is a dice roll modifier, or a die roll modifier. And typically you'll see that in relation to a CRT, because you'll have a CRT, and below it, it will say DRMs.
Yeah.
So
and it'll list 5 or 6 things that you'll get.
You've got your little odds-based column, and you're going to roll your dice, and then you add your die roll modifiers. And those might be for things like having lots of guys,
or combined arms, tanks and men,
different types of guys, or having good terrain, or good command, or all sorts of things.
Being in supply or out of supply, there's all.
DRMs are a plus, or they can be a negative, and they change the value on the dice that you roll before you consult the CRT.
So I rolled a 6 with a -1 DRM. Oh, okay, I change it from a 6 to a 5. Then I consult the CRT to find out what happens. So, yeah, pretty simple. So ZOC.
So ZOC stands for Zone of Control. In some games, you will see the phrase EZOC, which stands for Enemy Zone of Control, just to be a bit more explicit about you and your opponent in certain situations. Now, Zone of Control relates to... this can vary.
Well, there's all different types of zones of control.
Generally, you'll have a unit, and they will sit in a space or a hex, and a zone of control is the area outside of where they are that they can influence in some form.
Basically, the 6 hexes that surround them.
That's the most common.
Typically.
Some games have it more or less, or that might change depending on if you're disrupted
or terrain.
Lost or terrain.
Like I think of North Africa games, a lot of times your zone of control doesn't project over like a ridge or
you just don't have them because there was
so much space. Yeah.
And so that it's a forced projection, and what that does is that it means you can't just like drive past a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
Or you might not be able to draw supply through those hexes into which the enemy can raid your supply lines. Yeah. Or all sorts of other things.
I always think of it as, okay, I'm an active, fresh, able unit in a hex. I have machine guns focused. I have a commander who's in good health. You can't run into the hex next to me. Based on scale, that might be a quarter mile away, or it might be 2 miles away. You cannot run into that hex without me having the ability to affect what happens to you. You're going to have to stop because you're going to come around the corner and you're going to see 3 tanks' guns aimed right at you with 50 infantry behind that. You can't run by that. You're going to get eviscerated.
And a lot of games will make you stop. Some games you just have to spend
an extra movement point.
And it's, you're walking through like this.
Yeah.
So zones of control, ZOC, you will see that a lot. So the other name for this 40X series is often referred to as the ZOC Bond series, which is the Zone of Control Bond, which is a special, unique function of zones of control in this game.
Yeah.
So that's, again, another layer of why we're bringing up this particular thing as well.
And while you mentioned the ZOC Bond typically is a standard zone of control, but it can project between units who are separated by a hex because it's a low counter density game typically.
Yes, it helps to keep guys off the board.
Yeah.
And where you basically would have 2 friendly zones of control overlapping, that becomes an impenetrable barrier. And if you have to retreat through that,
you're dead.
Die because there's so much fire coming at you.
So zones of control, in my opinion, are one of the very basic elements, along with CRT, the basic elements of any good war game.
Those will pop up in most Hex Encounter war games.
And we've played some Hex Encounters that didn't have zones of control, and I always laugh because I ask myself, okay, what was the designer trying to show here as I drive my tank right by your guys right down the road? It doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah, there's all sorts of reasons for it. But
so the next thing that I had on the list, what about column shift while we're talking about CRTs?
That's fair. So a column shift is, if you think about a table, a column shift is exactly what it sounds like. Where let's say we had that 4-to-1 odds.
Yeah.
But you have a column shift to the left. So you're going to move down 1 column from the 4-to-1 column down to the 3-to-1 column.
And typically a column shift will come because you're in a defensive terrain. You might be in a woods, or you might have had a good roll on a preparation or an artillery barrage, something like that, or air support that forces you might have good odds as the attacker, but I had better preparation, so I'm going to make you a little less effective.
So the column shifts have the same effect as a die roll modifier. It's just the column shifts move this way and the die roll modifiers move this way.
Yeah.
And that's also that's part of the CRT. It's very interesting to see what does what, because we played some games where they don't have DRMs.
Yeah.
They only have column shifts. So you'll have a column shift for combined arms, you'll have a column shift for defensive terrain, you'll have a column shift for supply, you'll have a column shift for air support. And you roll your dice, there's no modifiers to the dice.
You just look on the right column.
Or you have the opposite, where you'll have like a million dice roll modifiers and then like one thing that does a column shift.
Sure.
And so you get all sorts of things within that.
I think I prefer column shifts to DRMs, but that's just me. And I don't know why that is.
I don't think I've got a preference.
Yeah.
I like it when you can do both.
I just like the concept of the column shift. It feels better.
I think it's simpler to adjudicate.
It is, yeah, a little bit.
Because you get, I've got 2 this way, 3 this way, and you just roll a die, and you don't have to do any math.
Okay. Let's go on. Let's do OOB.
Okay. So OOB stands for Order of Battle. This is a phrase you'll hear a lot because pretty much every game has one in some form or another. So an Order of Battle is the big long list of units in the game, and it will typically involve where they set up as well as
when they come in the game,
schedule of reinforcements,
or even what condition are they in. Sometimes units will start reduced because they've already been involved in a running engagement that leads up to that scenario.
And the Order of Battle is also, I feel like, that's one of the points of very heavy research that game designers do.
Well, and also one of the points of extreme disagreement by some historian wargamers who want to ask, well, why did you do this? Why did you give that SS unit this power when they were only half strength during the battle? Well,
why did
whatever.
you combine these 2 guys into one counter?
Right.
Okay.
Sometimes you have to make a decision on that OOB based on playability and what you're trying to get through with the battle.
But it's basically just like a roster of all the units
Yep.
in the game, and typically set up instructions that kind of match
Yeah.
together. Some games, it's very important, and in other games, it's even more important, because
Yeah.
that OOB will tell you, like, it gives you indication about like formations and sticking them together, and you really have to pay attention to those
Yeah.
as you set them up. But like, some
And the
games,
reason for that is when there is a formation focus, you will not be able to activate those units unless they're in
Yeah.
command range, typically of their headquarter unit.
and they're trying to go for like historical stuff.
Yeah.
When you think about something like, gosh, what do we
Well,
play?
Panzer Lair wouldn't be commanded by something else, right?
Right.
That has to be commanded by that headquarter unit.
But then we look at a game like The Lamps Are Going Out. There's no order of
No.
battle in that game because it's at such a high scale where the units don't matter, they're just generic.
Yep.
Like, it's just some strength points.
That's typically in your grand strategic, grand tactical
Yeah.
style games. Let's talk about movement, because there's quite a bit
Yes.
different types of movement. So there's exploitation movement, infiltration movement. You don't see that a whole
Yeah,
lot.
that's less common.
Overrun combat, which I think of movement. So let's talk about exploitation first.
So, regular movement, you're going to move guys around, right? You are going to spend what is called MPs, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Movement points. You will have a number
On your
an
counter,
amount that this unit is assigned, you can spend that many points.
and typically in a counter, that's in the far right-hand corner.
Yes.
Typically, but sometimes they're different. Typically it's combat with maybe a ranged superscript, defense with potentially a ranged superscript, and then movement, sometimes with a color, right? Because white units might be exploitation movement capable.
Yeah.
We played that in Ardennes. Didn't they have exploitation movement? Trying to remember what
The
it was
white
called.
is mech movement, the black is leg movement.
Okay.
The yellow band is exploit movement.
Got it. So anyway, so exploitation movement. What is exploitation movement?
So if something is exploitation movement capable, there'll be some denotation on the counter or in the rules. And typically speaking, exploitation movement is you do move and fight, and
You've opened up some holes or killed
exploitation
some
movement
units.
is to exploit that.
To
you
move
can
through.
typically move again.
Yep.
And so usually you'll find that those are fast units. Either they'll be like mechanized or motorized, or they might be cavalry units.
Yep.
Or,
Because they're more mobile.
something with mobility and speed,
Yep.
where they can almost double move but make use of the stuff you've done in combat.
And what I would say about exploitation move in a game, if you have exploitation capable units, if you're not taking advantage of that every turn,
Yes.
you are losing.
You do not put it into a game unless it is
It's
supposed
important.
to be used
Yeah.
and maximized.
So I think when you know that you can do that, if you're not doing that each and every turn and doing it to its maximum, you are not going to win that game. Just to be honest, right? Infiltration movement.
So infiltration movement is much less common, but infiltration movement, typically speaking, is the kind of what it says, but it's the idea of moving slowly but stealthily
Through zones of control
through areas
or
you either couldn't move in or would be very difficult, or you would subject yourself to enemy fire or something
Right.
like that. And so it's a way to like move from maybe one hex to another hex through lots of zones of control that would normally be prohibited, or it's to kind of sneak through an area that historically they did under the cover of darkness, or there was some level of surprise, and it's just they create things like infiltration movement as an exception to a lot
Yeah.
of the other movement prohibition rules.
and typically units that have it, I would say, are smaller infantry based
yeah.
commando style units. So a game that I can think that has a lot of infiltration movement is Holland 44.
Yeah.
Some of those paratroopers, in order to get to the bridgehead first, based on where they land and what's around them, they're going to have to use some infiltration movement to get beyond zones of control and then be able to use their normal movement. So it's not as common, but also in the Pacific theater, I feel like the Japanese have a lot of infiltration
Yes.
movement, or even the Americans.
And it's that nighttime sneaking around.
Yeah. getting in position.
We don't have the same technology where we can see people at night.
Yeah, overrun combat. That's kind of another form of movement.
Yeah, overrun combat is something that often happens during movement. And it's where, if you've got a big stack of guys and they've got one little guy, you just kind of steamroll them.
So say you had 15 combat factors and you roll up on an infantry unit that only has 2 or 1. If you have so many more than them, typically you can
you spend
run over
an extra
them.
movement point and walk over them because it's not worth sitting down and doing a combat.
And rolling the dice.
Not have
Yeah.
stopped you.
So that it's not in all games, but it is from time to
it's
time.
A combat within the movement phase.
Yep.
That's just additional.
So we talked about counter anatomy.
Let's talk about strategic movement.
Okay, strategic movement. Yep, go ahead.
Strategic movement is in a lot of games.
Yes.
It's something you'll come up a lot, and it will look very different and function very different. But typically speaking, strategic movement is the concept of getting guys from like where
the back,
they were trained or where they spawned, and getting them up to the front. It will either follow like roads or railroads.
Yep.
It's usually in these very large, very busy supply lines. And in almost every game I've ever played, you cannot start, enter, or end your movement.
A zone of control.
Yeah, in or adjacent to an enemy unit.
Because they're literally just kind of 2-timing it, right?
Yes.
Double timing it.
Quadruple speed.
Yeah.
You're on like a bus. It's not.
And you're
armored.
running. Yeah.
We're just driving on a road where it's friendly, and
Yeah.
you get to where you want to be. Then you walk up using your regular tactical movements.
The
to
next
get into
turn.
combat,
Yep.
kind of thing.
Yeah. Also, a very important concept. If you're not using that in games, you're losing.
Yeah.
So,
if it's in the game and you're not using it.
Yeah.
They put it in there for a reason.
You know, it was interesting. We played Verdun, 1916 Steel Inferno, I think is what it's called. And that had strategic movement. And it was extremely important, particularly for the French, but also for the German, to get those units from the back up to the front and across the front as quickly as possible because holes open up.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about activations a little bit. So there's a couple different types of activations. There's HQ activation. So what is that? What's HQ activation?
An HQ activation is where, through some mechanism in the game, you will activate a specific headquarters, and they will either have a range on them, or they will have like a color assigned to them,
or a number of units that they can.
And they'll be able to activate however many units within that range, or that match their color, and that it's kind of like this knock-on effect. Hey, this guy, he's going to get these guys to move, right? Your leaders give you your orders, you fulfill those orders.
Yep.
And there's all sorts of different formats of how that happens. But
chit pull is another one that typically activate chit pull activation. So you'll pull a formation and that entire formation can move.
Yeah, so a chit pull is you will have a cup with chits in it, and each one of those represents an HQ on the board or something else, and you will literally just pick one out, and that's
they
the
can
blue
move.
guy. We're going to activate the blue HQ. He's going to activate these blue guys. Done.
Okay, let's continue on the focus of movement because I've got 2 more here. Area movement. What is area movement?
Area movement. Okay, area movement is like a game mechanic in itself. So you'll hear about the area movement or area impulse series from Mike Renard. But area movement is typically, I'm going to activate an area, and it's, the board will be divided up.
It's like a geographic area.
Not hex encounters.
Spaces.
It's more spaces.
Yep.
I've got a bunch of guys in this space. I'm going to activate this area, and area move is I will move everyone who starts in this area, and we will move to other areas.
Some you can split up. Some it's the same.
Yeah, and you might have like, I can move to one other space or 2 or as many as you want, but it's picking up a bunch of guys from one location and moving them to others. And usually you have a bit more freedom in that.
Yeah.
But those games have, they might have anywhere from like 20 to 40 areas on them, and it's much less regulated than like the geographical hex map.
Yeah. So the other one I have is point-to-point movement.
Yes. So that's...
Now these aren't acronyms, but point-to-point movement, you might be, what?
Here. So point-to-point movement is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It's just a different format where you'll have areas, and there's be hundreds of them on the board, and they will have connections.
Yeah.
And those will be, either normal, or they might have like railroads, or they might have like
rivers
and rivers, and so it's points connected, and so it looks it's very striking on the board. And so point-to-point movement is you're literally moving from point to point through these different connections, again, spending your movement points based on what the color or type of the connection is, stopping when you get to enemies or whatever.
And typically I feel like point-to-point movement, when the designers put those maps together, those points follow, like you said, the mountain ranges and the rivers and the roads. And, if you're moving through a mountainous area, typically it takes 2 movement points
much
to
more
get through the mountains. But on a river, it might be half a movement point, but that you're moving from a point to a point. So I think that's all the movement, different types. Let's talk about what is a counter versus what is a chit and what is the difference.
Okay.
Because I think there is a difference, and we have these discussions often.
Yes. And individual games might define them slightly differently. But to me, it kind of stems from the phrase hex and counter. So we have a hex and counter war game, which means you have hexes and you have counters on those hexes.
And those counters represent units.
Yes. In my brain, a counter represents a combat unit or an HQ, some tactical unit.
It has numbers on it, typically, right? A combat, a defense, a movement, a command rating,
yes,
a supply rating, something.
I push my counters around on the table.
Yeah. A chit.
A chit, on the other hand, is more like an administrative
marker. Yeah.
So it might be like, this is a supply dump, or this is a disorganized marker, or this is a trench, where that's not a unit that's going to necessarily act of its own volition, but those are administrative markers to help us assess the state of the board.
Yep.
And so you'll hear us say counter and chit, and sometimes we will say those interchangeably.
Yeah.
But
and it is confusing in wargaming circles, I think. But
understand that the reality is they all come off the same punch board, and if you see people talking about counters and chits in the same sentence, it's not that big a deal. It's not something else where you're like, oh,
well,
what are they talking
one thing I would say I have not heard is we mentioned chit pull activation. Chit refers to the counters that are put into typically a cup or
the administrative part of.
Yeah, but I've never heard counter pull. It's chit pull.
Yeah.
It's.
But that's the phrase in common use.
But and typically those chits you pull out for those activations, they'll say a formation or a unit name or an event that's going to happen. So counter versus chit, understand they're really all kind of the same thing and can be used interchangeably. But a counter typically specifically refers to a unit on the board.
Yes.
Chits are everything else: markers, status, chit pull, etc.
Yes.
I think that's a general
But
overview
if you
of
see
that.
both of those terms, it's not.
Yep.
Just understand it's not something. Oh,
let's talk about reinforcement schedule.
So reinforcement schedule, we kind of talked about earlier when we talked about the order of battle, the OOB. So reinforcement schedule will literally be when and who comes onto the board and where. So you set up all your units with the big setup card or whatever that looks like, and then it'll be turn 2, and it'll say turn 2, and it'll say you get this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and they enter from this hex side.
Hex 3428.
Number.
Yeah.
Or they pop up in this particular area. And then it'll be like, and for the opposition side, they're going to get this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And that's just turn 2. And that'll be turn 3, and turn 4, and turn 5. And so you're going to play the turn, at the end of the turn, or whenever, you're going to dig out all of those reinforcements. Some games have what are called counter sleds, where you can set those up beforehand. Here's all my turn 2 guys.
So it's like a piece of paper that has different
either holding
turn numbers and holding boxes for the counters that come in on those turns.
Not all games have that. It's very convenient.
It's very nice.
If you've got the space where you can set that up.
And it's typically in bigger games.
Yeah, so you don't have to go fishing at the end of every turn, which can be a drag.
Well, one thing I've never liked about reinforcement schedules is I know exactly when your units are going to come on the board. That has always bothered me about wargaming.
Sure, but most of those are historical, and it's just like that's when they did.
I understand, but I can still look forward. Ooh, I've got the next 3 turns without you getting any reinforcements. That can affect sometimes my strategy.
Yes.
That's just my opinion. Just my opinion.
I don't think there's I don't think there's a way around that, though.
Well, why can't it just be hidden information?
Because
why do I have to let you know that on turn 6 I get these 5 guys? You don't know they're coming in on turn 1, on turn 6.
After you've played a game once, you know.
I know. Well, that's a good point.
There's no way to get around it. So.
Anyway, supply. Let's talk about supply. So what is supply in a war game?
Supply in a war game.
Why do I feel like I'm the interviewer here?
Okay. The supply in a war game is, well, it's modeled in a lot of different ways, at a lot of different scales, but supply,
and to a lot of different levels in those games. Sometimes it's very poo-pooed. Sometimes it's extremely important and one of the focuses of the game.
Supply represents everything that combat units typically need to be able to function and to fight and to progress.
Typically ammunition, food,
fuel, food, all
medicine,
that kind of stuff. A lot of it is abstracted into supply.
Yeah.
Some games are a bit more specific, but mostly it is supply. Now, what form that takes in a game and what that looks like can be wildly different.
Yeah.
So you'll have games where, like if it's a tactical level game, and it's like, this counter is one guy, and he is sat behind a bush, and he's trying to shoot that guy. Mm-hmm. A lot of the times, those don't track supply. However, they might have like a heavy weapons team that does have ammunition counters. That's a form of supply. When those ammunition counters run out,
they're ineffective.
They're screwed.
Yeah.
There might be some way to get those back. Mm-hmm. That's supply. Or you go all the way up to something like OCS, Operational Combat Series, where the game is only about supply, mm-hmm. and there's also combat. Where
that's why operational is before the combat, because the supply. It really should be SCS, but they already had standard combat series. But supply anyway.
Supply combat series.
Yeah.
But like that game is a logistics puzzle.
Yeah.
The game is about being able to draw supply, how many points you get, making sure you can get that supply to
where you
your
need
units, because without that supply in that game, they can do nothing.
Yeah.
And you also get into the hilarious part in that game where you get all your supply and you give it to only your tanks, and you never use artillery in the whole game, which is very anachronistic. Mm-hmm. Because the Quartermaster General would have sent you artillery shells and you would have had to use them.
Right.
But like that's the puzzle of that game, is I've got these supply points, how can I use them to such a granular level that without that fuel, your tanks do not drive.
Yep.
So yeah.
I mean, I really feel like we've covered most of the rest that I've got on this list. Is there anything? Yeah.
There's probably a lot more.
Sure.
If you have any questions or phrases that come up that you want to maybe hear about, or any acronyms and stuff, put them in the comments. Maybe we'll accumulate some for another one later on.
I think the concept of acronyms is a wholly governmental based thing.
Oh, it's a military thing.
Right, a military thing, but I also have acronyms in my business, which is government.
Yeah.
And I feel like we almost look for acronyms to create so that I can name something cool, right?
Well, yeah, government definitely does.
And that also happens in the private sector somewhat, but in essence, the acronyms that are used are intended to create an image of what it represents that allows you to recall it quickly, right? And that's the same thing in war games.
Yeah, or at least it's just easier to say, because no one wants to say like
combat results table,
all the time, right?
Yeah,
it's OCS. We're gonna roll it on a CRT with a DRM. What's the column shift? I know what that means. Someone else might not know what that means.
Would be like what?
But it's a much quicker way to communicate in what's already a fairly long format hobby as well.
I do like acronyms, and I'm not ashamed that we use them. No. But I do think it's important sometimes to explain to those that are not informed what those mean, so that they are less daunting, because they can be daunting.
Yeah, when we go to conventions, we end up teaching a lot of games to new people or playing with new people. And I'm very cognizant about the way that I talk about games with those people in those situations. When it's us two playing a game down here, it's just all
acronym
jargon,
city,
you know.
And that's what happens once you get into war games, and I mean, we've been playing them for 10 years now, and it's amazing the things that you take for granted, that when you say certain things, I completely and implicitly understand what that refers to.
And one thing I do appreciate is that there are some, and it's typically in like big games, there are big games that will have a full glossary of a lot of what we've talked about with like stated definitions for that game, but a lot of it can be generalized as well.
Yeah.
And I really like when a game has a glossary, because I just think it adds that extra layer of accessibility.
Yeah.
Like, I still have to read those, and especially in like Ancients or Medieval or Napoleonics games where I'm not as well versed in some of the stuff. They'll talk about like this particular type of thing. I'm like, what on earth is that? Glossary. Done.
Sure.
So I really
get
appreciate
it now.
when games do that.
So anyway, acronyms, jargon.
There's a lot of it. Hopefully that was helpful to someone.
I hope it wasn't too boring.
And if it was, thanks for watching anyway. But yeah, let us know if there's more. Or
I'm sure we missed some.
Another video on this later on down the line might be helpful with more stuff in it, because there's a lot of different terms and things we could discuss.
Sure.
But appreciate you sticking with us at least. And thanks for watching. Appreciate you tuning in. I've been Alexander for theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.